For an avoidant, openness is not their default. It's a risk. And people don't take risks like that unless something inside them is shifted. Now, here's where many people misunderstand the situation. They expect emotional openness to look obvious, expressive, even dramatic. But that's not how it works with an avoidant. Their version of vulnerability is often quiet. It might come in the form of a passing comment about their past, a moment where they admit something made them anxious, or even a subtle change in tone when they speak about something personal. These moments can be easy to overlook if you're expecting grand declarations. But in reality, they are far more meaningful than words that come easily to others. Because for them, nothing about this is easy. When an avoidant begins to open up, what they are really doing is loosening a lifelong defense mechanism. They are challenging an internal belief that says, if I let someone see all of me, I will lose control, I will get hurt, I will be overwhelmed. That belief doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't vanish just because they met someone special. It stays there in the background, creating tension every time they consider letting you in. So when they choose to share something real with you, understand what's happening beneath the surface. There's a negotiation taking place inside them. One part says, stay safe, stay guarded, don't go there. And another part, one that only activates when there is genuine emotional investment, says maybe this person is different. Maybe it's worth the risk. And when that second voice starts to win, even occasionally, that's where authentic love begins to reveal itself. But here's the deeper layer, the philosophical truth behind all of this. Love, in its most authentic form, is not about comfort. It's about expansion. It challenges the identities we've built to protect ourselves. It asks us to step beyond the familiar and into something uncertain. For an avoidant, that expansion is particularly intense because it requires them to move against their core conditioning. So when they open up to you, even slightly, they're not just sharing information. They're expanding their sense of self to include you. They are allowing you to exist in a space that was once reserved only for them. And that changes everything. Now, does this mean they will suddenly become emotionally fluent? No. Does it mean they won't retreat at times? Not necessarily. Growth is not linear, especially for someone whose entire nervous system is wired around independence and self-protection. But what matters is the direction of movement. Are they gradually letting you see more? Are they allowing moments of realness to replace patterns of avoidance? If the answer is yes, then you are not dealing with surface-level interest. You are witnessing the early stages of something real. And your role in this dynamic is crucial because when someone takes the risk to open up, how that moment is received determines whether they will do it again. If they feel judged, misunderstood, or overwhelmed, they retreat. Not because they don't care, but because the risk feels too great. But if they feel safe, if they feel seen without pressure, something powerful happens. Something powerful happens. The door they cracked open opens a little wider next time. That's how trust is built with an avoidant, not through force, not through demands, but through consistent emotional safety. So if you're looking for a sign that an avoidant feels authentic love for you, don't just listen to what they say, observe what they allow you to see. Because access to their inner world is not given lightly. It is earned, it is tested, and when it is offered, even in fragments, it means you matter more than their fear. And that is where real love begins. You begin to notice something subtle, but incredibly important. In moments where tension rises, where emotions become real, unpredictable, and potentially overwhelming, the avoidant doesn't disappear the way they used to. They don't immediately shut down, change the subject, or create distance to regain control. Instead, they stay. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not comfortably, but consciously. And that shift right there is one of the clearest indicators that what they feel for you has moved beyond surface level interest into something far more authentic. Because you have to understand withdrawal is not random for an avoidant. It's regulation. It's how they've learned to cope with emotional intensity. When things get too close, too real, or too demanding, their instinct is to create space. Not because they don't care, but because closeness for them has historically been associated with overwhelm, loss of autonomy, or even pain. So distance becomes safety, silence becomes control, and detachment becomes protection. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When an avoidant begins to feel genuine love, they don't suddenly lose that instinct. It doesn't vanish. The urge to withdraw is still there, still active, still whispering that it would be easier to step back, to disconnect, to return to what feels safe and familiar. But love introduces a competing force, a force that says stay. And when that force becomes strong enough to interrupt their default reaction, to make them pause instead of pull away, you are witnessing a profound internal shift. Because now, it's no longer just about self-protection. It's about connection. It's about valuing the relationship enough to tolerate the discomfort that comes with staying present. And make no mistake, this is discomfort for them. Staying in an emotionally charged moment, engaging in a difficult conversation, or simply sitting with vulnerability without escaping. These are not small things in the psychology of an avoidant. These are acts of courage. They are choosing to override years of conditioning in order to remain connected to you. But here's the nuance that many people miss. Presence doesn't always look the way you expect it to. It may not come with perfect communication or emotional fluency. They might struggle to find the right words. They might need pauses, space within the moment, or time to process before responding. But the key difference is they don't fully leave. They don't abandon the connection altogether. There is an effort, however imperfect, to remain engaged, and that effort is everything. Because in psychology, behavior reveals priority, not intention, not potential, behavior. And when someone consistently chooses to stay present in moments where their instinct is to leave, it tells you that something deeper is at play. It tells you that the relationship has become important enough to challenge their internal wiring. This is where love begins to reshape identity. Philosophically, we often think of love something that feels good, something that brings ease and comfort. But real love, authentic love, often does the opposite at first. It disrupts patterns, it confronts defenses. It asks us to grow beyond who we've been in order to become who the relationship requires us to be. For an avoidant, that growth is measured in presence, not grand gestures, not constant reassurance, but the willingness to remain, especially when it would be easier to retreat. Now, this doesn't mean they get it right every time. There will still be moments of distance, moments where the old patterns resurface. Growth is not a straight line. It's a process of progress, not perfection. But what you're looking for is the trend. Are they coming back more quickly? Are they trying to stay longer? Are they showing a growing tolerance for emotional closeness? If the answer is yes, then you're not just seeing effort. You're seeing transformation, and your response to this matters more than you realize. Because when someone is pushing against their own limits to stay present, the environment they're stepping into needs to feel safe, not critical. If presence is met with pressure or judgment, it reinforces the very fear they're trying to overcome. But if it's met with understanding, patience, and emotional steadiness, it creates a feedback loop that encourages them to keep showing up. That's how change becomes sustainable. So when you see an avoidant staying in the moment, leaning into a conversation instead of escaping it, remaining emotionally available even when it's difficult, don't underestimate what you're witnessing. That is not just effort. That is a redefinition of their relationship with intimacy. And that only happens when what they feel for you is real. Because in the end, anyone can be present when it's easy. But when someone chooses to stay when everything inside them is telling them to leave, that's not convenience. That's commitment. There comes a point where the shift is no longer just internal. It starts to show up in how they structure their life. And this is where things become unmistakably real. Because an avoidant doesn't just guard their emotions. They guard their time, their routines, their independence. These are not small things to them. These are the pillars of how they maintain control over their world. So when you begin to notice that they are making space for you within that structure, you're not looking at something casual. You're looking at a reordering of priorities. And priorities don't change without a reason. You see, for someone with avoidant tendencies, life is often designed around self-sufficiency. Their schedule, their habits, even their future plans are typically built in a way that minimizes dependency on others. It's not that they don't value connection, it's that they've learned to function without needing it. Independence becomes not just a preference, but an identity. I handle things on my own. I don't rely. I don't adjust. That's the internal narrative. So when that same person starts to adjust, when they begin to consider you in their decisions, when they carve out time for you without being asked, when they subtly but consistently include you in their day-to-day life, something deeper is happening beneath the surface. They are integrating you into their sense of self. And that is not easy for them because integration requires flexibility, and flexibility challenges control. It means their world is no longer entirely self-contained. It means someone else's presence, needs, and importance are now part of the equation. And for an avoidant, that can feel destabilizing at first. There's a tension between maintaining independence and allowing closeness. But when love is authentic, that tension doesn't lead to wit. H-drawl, it leads to adaptation. Now, here's where many people misinterpret this stage. They look for dramatic gestures, sweeping declarations, or obvious sacrifices. But that's not how an avoidant typically expresses prioritization. Their language is subtle, but it's consistent. It's in the way they start checking in with you. The way they remember small details. The way they begin to align their plans with yours, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. It might look like them choosing to spend time with you after a long day when they would normally prefer to be alone. It might look like them factoring you into future plans, even in small ways, mentioning something weeks ahead and assuming you'll be part of it. It might look like them compromising on things that in the past they would have held rigidly. These are not random behaviors. These are signals, because behavior reveals what someone values. And when an avoidant starts to consistently invest their time and energy into you, they are showing you, without needing to say it, that you matter. But let's go deeper than behavior. Philosophically, what's happening here is a shift from isolation to interdependence, and that's a significant evolution. True connection isn't about losing independence, it's about expanding it to include another person. It's about recognizing that strength is not just found in standing alone, but in choosing who you stand with. For an avoidant, this realization doesn't come easily. It requires them to challenge a deeply ingrained belief that closeness equals limitation. And when they begin to see that connection can actually enhance their life rather than restrict it, that's when prioritization becomes natural, not forced. But again, this process is not perfect. There may still be moments where they pull back, where they need space to recalibrate. That doesn't negate the progress. What matters is the overall pattern. Are they showing up more? Are they including you more? Are they making choices that reflect your importance in their life? If the answer is yes, then you're not just part of their world. You're becoming part of how their world is defined. And your role in this dynamic is not to demand more, but to recognize what's already being given. Because when someone is learning to prioritize connection in a way they never have before, acknowledgement becomes reinforcement. It tells them this matters. This is working. Keep going. That's how growth stabilizes. So don't just listen for words. Watch how they allocate their time, their energy, their attention. Because those are the currencies of real love. And when an avoidance starts investing those into you consistently, it's not accidental. It's intentional. It's intentional. In the end, people make time for what they value, and they prioritize what they don't want to lose. So if you find yourself becoming part of their structure, not just their moments, understand what that truly means. You are no longer an option in their life. You are becoming a priority they are choosing to keep. There's a moment in this process where the shift becomes even more nuanced, yet incredibly revealing. It's not just that they're letting you in or staying present or even making space for you in their life. It's that they begin attempting something that doesn't come naturally to them at all. They begin trying to express what they feel. Now, with an avoidant, this is where things can look confusing if you don't understand the psychology behind it, because emotional expression for them is not a fluent language. It's something they've often suppressed, minimized, or learned to bypass altogether. Feelings exist, of course. They're human, but translating those feelings into words, into vulnerability, into something another person and can actually receive, that's where the challenge lies. So when they start trying, it doesn't always come out clean. It might be indirect. It might be brief. It might even sound overly logical or slightly detached. You might hear something like, I don't usually do this, or this is kind of hard for me to say before they share something small but meaningful. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss the weight of that moment entirely. But that moment matters. But it's too, because what you're witnessing is not just communication. It's effort against conditioning. You have to understand, avoidants don't struggle with emotions because they don't feel deeply. In many cases, they feel very deeply. The struggle is with exposure. It's with what happens when those emotions leave the safety of their internal world and become visible to someone else. There's a perceived loss of control in that, a sense that once something is spoken, it can be judged, rejected, or misunderstood. So they learn to keep things contained. Now, when authentic love enters the picture, that containment starts to feel limiting, not because their fear disappears, but because their desire to connect begins to outweigh their need to protect. And that creates a kind of internal pressure, a pressure to express, even if they don't fully know how. And that's why their attempts can feel imperfect. But imperfection does not mean insincerity. In fact, with an avoidant, it's often the opposite. The less polished it is, the more real it tends to be, because it hasn't been rehearsed, it hasn't been filtered. It's simply the best they can do in a moment where they're pushing beyond their comfort zone. This is where your perception becomes critical. If you're expecting emotionally articulate, fully formed expressions, you might overlook what's actually being offered. But if you shift your focus from how it's being said to the fact that it's being said at all, you start to see the truth of what's happening. They are trying. And that effort is one of the clearest indicators of authentic love. Because people don't try to learn a language they don't care about speaking. Now let's take this a step deeper. Philosophically, expression is an act of exposure. It's a decision to make the internal external, to take something that is entirely yours and allow another person to interact with it. And that requires trust, not just in the other person, but in the idea that connection is worth the risk of being seen. For an avoidant, that's a profound shift in worldview. It means they are beginning to believe, even if only partially, that vulnerability is not weakness. That being known does not automatically lead to loss. That someone can see them more fully and still stay. And when that belief starts to form, even in fragile stages, it changes how they show up. But again, this is not a linear transformation. There will be moments where they open up and then retreat, where they express something meaningful and then pull back into silence. That's not contradiction. It's integration in progress. They are testing a new way of being while still holding on to old patterns. What matters is not perfection, but repetition. Are they continuing to try? Are those moments of expression becoming more frequent, more natural over time? If they are, then you are witnessing emotional growth in real time, and your response plays a powerful role in shaping that growth. Because when someone takes the risk to express something vulnerable, and it's met with criticism, dismissal, or pressure for more, it reinforces their fear. But when it's met with understanding, patience, and grounded presence, it creates safety. And safety is what allows expression to evolve into connection. So don't just listen, or perfect words. Listen for effort. Listen for the pauses, the hesitations, the moments where they step slightly beyond what's comfortable to say something real. Because that's where the truth lives. In the end, authentic love is not always loud or eloquent. Sometimes it's quiet, uncertain, and still finding its voice. But when someone who has spent their life avoiding emotional exposure begins to speak from that place, even imperfectly, it tells you everything you need to know. They're not just feeling something. They're choosing to share it. At a certain stage, something even more profound begins to unfold, something that goes beyond behavior, beyond communication, beyond even presence. It moves into the realm of self-awareness and intentional change. And this is where you start to see whether what they feel is not just emotional, but transformational. Because when an avoidant begins to work on themselves without being pushed, without ultimatums, without external pressure, you are no longer looking at surface level interest, you are looking at internal commitment. Now, let's be very clear about something. Avoidant patterns are not accidental. They are deeply ingrained strategies, ways of thinking, feeling, and reacting that have been reinforced over years. Pulling away, shutting down, prioritizing independence over connection. These are not random habits. They are protective systems designed to maintain emotional safety. And protective systems do not dismantle themselves easily. So when someone with these patterns begins to recognize them, when they start to say things like, I know I tend to withdraw, or I realize I shut down when things get intense, that awareness alone is significant. But awareness by itself is not enough. The real shift happens when awareness turns into action. When they don't just see the pattern, they start challenging it. And here's it tenders. They see, that's the key distinction. They're not doing it because they've been forced to. They're not doing it to avoid losing you in a reactive, fear-driven way. They're doing it because something inside them has decided that growth is necessary, that connection matters, that the relationship is worth evolving for. That kind of motivation is rare and it's powerful because change that is externally driven is temporary. It lasts only as long as the pressure is present. But change that is internally chosen, that comes from a personal realization, from a genuine desire to become better, that kind of change has depth. It has sustainability, and you start to see it in subtle but undeniable ways. They might begin reflecting more, pausing before reacting, catching themselves in moments where they would have previously pulled away and instead choosing a different response. It won't be perfect. There will still be moments where old habits take over. But now, those moments are followed by awareness, by correction, by effort to do better next time. That's growth. And growth, especially in this context, is one of the clearest expressions of authentic love. Because think about it, people don't willingly confront their own limitations unless something truly matters to them. It's uncomfortable. It requires humility. It forces them to look at parts of themselves they've avoided for a long time. And most people, if given the choice, would rather stay within what's familiar than step into that level of discomfort. But love changes the equation. It introduces a reason strong enough to make discomfort feel worthwhile. Philosophically, this is where love becomes more than just a feeling. It becomes a catalyst. It becomes the force that pushes an individual beyond their established identity.